conversation. Our guest today is Dr. Priya Abraham. She is the director of the National Institute of Virology in Pune. Her tenure at the helm of India's most experienced institute in virology has been that of trial by fire, with the NIV at the forefront of India's battle against novel coronavirus. NIV was the first to isolate the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which causes COVID-19. It was also the first to detect the presence of COVID-19 in a sample in a diagnostic laboratory. Welcome, Dr. Abraham, to DD India. Within a couple of months of your taking over as the director of NIV Pune, the world witnessed the outbreak of COVID-19, leaving you with hardly any time to settle, if I may say. What went through your mind when you understood, when you realized the enormity of the challenge posed by COVID-19 before you and your team?
To be very frank, neither me nor the team could comprehend the enormity of what lay ahead for us. But the 2 months that I had before we started grappling in the laboratory with this outbreak gave me a time to understand my team, the capacity of my team, the capacity of the institution, which really held me in good stead.
So you couldn't understand the enormity of the challenge then, but it's been some months since the NIV isolated the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And like I've said, you were the first to do that in India. What have you studied about the virus so far?
Well, we have done many things once we were able to isolate the virus. For one, we were able to generate vast amounts of antigen because we were able to grow up the virus in culture. And the ability to generate vast amounts of virus antigen helped us hand over technology to at least 7 different commercial companies to make the IgG ELISA against the SARS-CoV-2. In addition, the capacity to be able to grow this virus has given us an opportunity to partner with one of the vaccine industries. We've handed over live virus to them. We've also been able to foray into in vitro drug susceptibility testing against this virus. We've also handed over the virus to some of the premier research organizations in the country, the live virus. So being able to isolate it and grow it up in our own facility really empowered us to, foray in different directions.
You've referred to the vaccine development efforts in India. I understand that ICMR, NIV, and Bharat Biotech are working together to develop a vaccine. What's the status of that?
We working with them, we've handed over the live virus to them, as I had mentioned earlier. And we are now partnering with them the virus that they have grown up after we handed over. The virus that has been analyzed in terms of ELISA, Western blot, animal studies that are ongoing right now. We are very much into animal studies with their candidate product, and that's where we are now.
The virus is mutating, but what are the challenges that come with a mutating virus?
Okay, so broadly speaking, especially RNA viruses have a propensity to mutate, some immensely, like the hepatitis C virus or the HIV virus. There are many RNA viruses for which the ability to make a vaccine has been challenging because the immunodominant proteins change a bit. Also, if a virus is changing by virtue of mutation, even to find a suitable drug candidate could be challenging. In the case of this virus, it's a coronavirus, which is also changing a little bit, but its degree of mutation is less compared to the ones I mentioned. And this is because of the proofreading capability of the exonuclease that increases the fidelity of the RNA synthesis with this virus.
What are the challenges that come with vaccine development of an RNA virus?
Yes, the challenges are that you may have made a candidate vaccine, but if this virus has mutated significantly enough to express a protein that is quite different because of the genetic mutations, then the efficacy of the vaccine could be, a little less, could be curtailed because of the changing nature of the outer proteins of the virus.
In terms of virulence or transmissibility, is there any impact that mutations have on the virus behavior?
We have not seen, I think literature does not point to any particular mutation that is associated with increased virulence, but there is one particular mutation which is known as the D614G, which leads to reduced S1 protein shedding. You know, it has spike proteins S1 and S2. So it leads to reduced S1 protein shedding, which could be correlated with enhanced infectivity of the virus.
You're telling us that there are various strains of the virus. Which ones are dominant in India, if I may ask?
If I may broadly talk about variants, they're also known as clades. There are many methods of classification. If I stick to the GISAID classification, there are broadly an S clade and an L clade. And in the L clade, you might have a G, a V, or an O, which is other. You know, they don't have a typical mutation associated with it. So yes, there are different clades reported world over. In India, we have some amount of geographical distribution. I think there are more than 700 Indian sequences that have been reported. And of them, if you look at Maharashtra, the state of Maharashtra, we have the G clade, the O clade, and the S clade that has been reported. In Gujarat, you have the G and a subvariant of that, the GH. In Delhi, for instance, you might have a lot of the O clade. So there are little variations geographically, and these really have point to the movement of people, you know, be it migrations or people coming into the country from different parts of the world. So it's linked with movement of individuals from one area to another.
NIV has done electron microscopy of the virus. Under the electron microscope, how does this virus look and how does it perform under various temperatures?
Okay, this virus looks like any other coronavirus. Coronaviruses are adorned by spikes, protruding spikes on its surface that makes it look like a crown. And in Latin, the word for crown is corona. And that's why these group of viruses are known as coronaviruses. Quite beautiful, actually, to view under the electron microscope. And with regard to studies on the impact of temperature on these viruses, these studies are underway and we will be publishing that soon.
And you've also done immune electron microscopy of the virus, where you put the virus along with the antibodies from a recovered person. In these circumstances, how does this virus behave?
Well, the immune electron microscopy has been standardized, and we are yet to make public the details. But typically in immune electron microscopy, when you add serum from a convalescent person to a specimen that has the virus and the antibody combine, leading to what is known as the formation of immunoaggregates. And when you look down the electron microscope, you see virus particles coming closer together and aggregating. That's what it would look like when you do immune electron microscopy.
NIV has also come up with the first of its kind virus neutralization assay, which is a blood test where you test, in fact, the presence of antibodies in the body of a person post-infection. How does it work in practical terms, and how useful has this been so far?
Well, this assay is a really good assay. I would say it's the gold standard for all antibody-based assays. But one challenge is that you are working with the live virus. So not everybody can use this assay. And this assay actually measures the ability of antibodies in an individual to neutralize the infectivity of this virus. So that's why it's called neutralize. It nullifies the infectivity of the virus. That's why it's called a neutralization assay. It is associated with the amount of protective antibodies an individual can have. So this I would call as the gold standard among all antibody assays. very useful when you're looking at vaccine efficacy studies, very useful when you're looking at people who have recovered from infection, when we are studying convalescent serum. Yes, we will see we can pick up this antibody, and yes, we've standardized it, and we're very comfortable doing this assay.
NIV has also come up with the Kavach ELISA antibody detection testing kits. Has that helped change the testing scenario in India, which was largely earlier dependent on the RT-PCR tests?
See, the role of any IgG ELISA is that it picks up antibodies that could be associated with exposure. It's little different from the neutralization assay. This IgG ELISA, we use an ELISA plate, and it's associated with where it tells you whether an individual has been exposed, but not necessarily protected. And yes, you could look at a particular hamlet or a particular containment area or in a healthcare setup to figure how many people have been exposed to the virus.
What is the sensitivity and specificity of the ELISA Kavach antibody detection testing kits? How different is this from, say, the Chinese antibody detection testing kits that were imported by India?
This is definitely superior to the rapid diagnostic devices that were imported by India from China. And ELISA intrinsically has a capacity to deliver much better sensitivity and specificity compared to a rapid diagnostic test. This particular assay we developed, we compared it to the neutralization assay, and it had a sensitivity of about 92% and a specificity of about 97.7%.
Are your scientists working on further improving the sensitivity and specificity?
Yes, it's on the cards to modify this ELISA into using not the whole virus antigen, but a recombinant antigen, which hopefully will give us even better accuracy indices.
NIV has been training lab technicians across the country as far as COVID-19 testing is concerned, and you've also been sending out a lot of consignments of the testing kits. How was all that achieved, if you could reflect on that, and how equipped are our laboratories as far as carrying out COVID-19 tests is concerned?
You know, we started with equipping about 13 laboratories when we started out. On Jan 23rd, we were the only lab to be able to do this test and to diagnose. And literally 2 months later, we were about 160 labs. And a few days ago, it has been recorded, and we've met target of 1,000 labs, of which about 730 are government labs and 270 are private labs. In terms of sending out equipment, we had an elaborate process of first doing a quality control on the reagents that we were putting together to send out to different laboratories. Then it was packaged with dry ice. Okay, and then it was dispatched to literally any part of the country, and we would acknowledge the immense help we received from the UDAN program, which was part of the Ministry of Civil Aviation. They helped us ship out our RT-PCR assay to literally any part in India.
What is the time on average that these testing kits take to produce results from the RT-PCR kits to the virus neutralization assays to the Kavach ELISA antibody detection testing kits?
Okay, you're comparing them head to head. Okay, real-time PCR would on average take short of 4 hours. But when we talk about duration of the assay, we must remember in real time, there is time taken to compare the details on a particular collection tube with the information, patient information that comes in, align all your samples, then process it, and then report it. But the assay per se takes under 4 hours, the RT-PCR. The neutralization assay takes somewhere between 2 to 3 days, almost 3 days. It's an elaborate assay because you have to wait to see whether the antibody has been successful in neutralizing the growth of the virus. So you have to wait to see, does the virus actually grow? If antibody is not there, virus will grow. If antibody was there, it will inhibit the growth of the virus. So you have to give that waiting time. And that's an elaborate assay which not everybody can do, and they need to have the containment facilities for. And the ELISA would take average about 2.5 to 2 3/4 of an hour.
You had highlighted the shortage of chemicals and reagents in India for use in RT-PCR tests. What's the status of that as of now? And does all of this indicate that we need to reduce our dependence on imports and build our own capacities?
Yes, there has been a shortage of imported reagents that we were initially depending on, because globally there has been a shortage. You know, most of the well-established products that we can get in terms of RNA extraction kits, etc., they've just maxed out. So yes, what another big activity here in NIV we have been undertaking is to validate a number of RNA extraction kits, RT-PCR kits, virus transport medium, even the swabs that are put into the virus transport medium is validated by us. And a number of companies have been coming forward with their products, and we have been validating and submitting those results to ICMR headquarters. But yes, it highlights the need for us to become self-reliant as a country, and we need to have quality made in India kits.
In an article that you had co-authored on the lessons learned from the first 100 days of COVID-19 pandemic in India, you'd made a case of expanding the network of laboratories in India. You say that 1,000 laboratories with PCR facilities need to be included, and there needs to be at least one laboratory in each of the 730 odd districts in India. How do you look at the progress on this front so far?
We've reached the target. Today, 1,000 odd laboratories are functional, able to do this assay. Not all are in the government sector. About 730 are from the government sector, 270 from the private sector. So we are on track. India is able to do about 75 lakh tests, more than 75 lakh tests in a day, thus far, and almost 2 lakh tests per day. So I think we are slowly inching up. Yes, for a country of this size, we need to do more.
Well, on the one hand, we see that NIV is doing in vitro drug testing, where you look at how the virus behaves along with a drug. On the other hand, you're also looking at various drug repurposing initiatives of others. In your assessment, where does India stand in terms of the search for a repurposed drug that is specific to COVID-19?
I think we haven't hit on this perfect drug from within India. There have been candidates that have been undergone trials in other countries. NIV has looked at a few drugs such as halofaginone. We've looked at nitazoxanide, lactoferrin, methylsoprenol, and a few other drugs in our own institute. I think we are yet to, on our own, find a really good repurposed drug.
You told me initially that you didn't realize the enormity of the challenge in front of you when you had taken over as the NIV director and the crisis had just struck the world. But we are aware that these are trying times, and currently researchers, scientists, virologists like you, they are working round the clock in what is a war room-like situation. How challenging has the past few months been for you and your team?
We have been, involved in a whole slew of activities. Testing, we've been ramping it up more and more and more. Today, we do over 2,000 tests in a day. Okay, and that calls for planning your team. There's a dearth, there's a paucity of trained manpower. Even if the government, the state government says, oh, we will give you staff. But the issue is we need to have trained individuals, trained technologists who can work within the system so that there's no risk to themselves or to others, and the assay is done correctly. So trained manpower, I think, is by far the most challenging thing for us. Of course, to work within the constraints of this lockdown, where people have not been able to come into work, and with sometimes skeletal staff, we have had problems. And then we have always had to, raise the bar, increase the throughput, make innovations in our assay. But I think this has been a hugely learning experience.
So, what have been the lessons that you've learned in this entire episode, and how challenging has this been for you personally?
For me personally, I have realized that yes, this has been hugely demanding. We've been working, 7 days a week, long hours, 10, 11, 12 hours in a day, unrelenting it has been. But I have learned to realize that, we need to tap on the skills and abilities of our colleagues and other other staff in this institution. And teamwork is the mantra for the day. We need to, garner all our skills, all our resources, and just deliver. The other thing I've also learned to get better at multitasking.
Okay. And will this COVID-19 pandemic prepare our researchers, scientists, and virologists for future pandemics?
I think so. I think scientists all over the world, including our country, have learned that we need to always be prepared. We need to have systems in place so that we can quickly work on protocols, improve on testing protocols. Innovation is very, very important. We need to learn to work within the constraints of a lockdown-like situation. And then also, we need to be very cognizant of the fact that, and in fact, a pandemic like this and others, hopefully that will not happen, but are likely to happen, could be the result of spillover from animal hosts into humans. So we need to realize and be aware of the changing resource landscapes, be it in the urban setting or in the agricultural setting, and that these changes could culminate in cross-species transmission. And also, as citizens of this planet, that what could actually, favor subsequent pandemics is progressive deforestation, foraying into forest land, having exotic food habits. Also the fact that population density, climate change, increased globalization could all work together to favor the emergence of pandemics. So I think we need to be constantly aware that it's multifactorial and guard and be prepared for such an eventuality.
Experts say that we need to learn to live with this virus, and we are looking at a new normal already. Is this new normal here to stay?
Absolutely. I mean, in fact, I dress down anybody in the institute whom I find without a mask. And we are not encouraging people to sit together and have their, lunch. Everybody is encouraged to have their meal by themselves, maintain that social distancing, and of course, hand and cough etiquette, washing hands, sanitizing your hands as frequently as possible. This will become the norm of the days to come, and we don't know for how long.
Thank you, Dr. Priya Abraham, for speaking to us on the COVID-19 pandemic, your experiences, the behavior of the virus, and so on, and all the very best to you for your future endeavors.
Thank you very much.